Welcome to Portsmouth this week, and I'm Jeff Richard. I'll be hosting today. The subject of today's conversation will be about our upcoming election. As everyone knows, November 6th is an election. With me today, we have John Klimm, our town administrator, and Sal Calceller. And Sal was the chair of the recently completed Charter Review Commission, where we spent a great deal of time reviewing our charter. So we want to talk about those things because on the ballot that everybody's going to see, not only do we have the federal items to concern with, but we also have all sorts of really important state votes to make. And then we will get to that last portion of the ballot, which is actually the second page of that, which has to do with the proposed changes to our charter, and there are several. So we're gonna start, I think, with talking with John just a bit about what's the importance of this election here.
Well, I think as you hear in all of the various local, state, and federal races, this really is an important year. Obviously, a presidential race. We have the various congressional races and a U.S. Senate race as well. So there obviously has been a lot of focus on the federal elections and as well. We not only have our state elections, state rep and state senate and the like, we have ballot questions statewide. I think I was talking to Sal earlier before the show, and he was saying something that I've heard as well, and that is for the folks who have already voted, they have been rather surprised at the length of the ballot with the various state questions and local questions as well. So it obviously is a very important, it's the keystone to our democracy. I think that certainly if you can believe the projections, there will be a very heavy turnout, which I think is great. And so whether your interest is federal, state, or local, there's something for everyone this election day. So we certainly hope that people will get out and vote. We tend to get a higher voter turnout on federal elections. And the 4-year president's cycle and the 2-year representative cycle tends to draw more people out. And of course we have all the local races as well, your school committee, your town council and the like, so that's brought out a lot of interest as well. Yeah, so we're marching forward to potentially a significant change or no change, one of the two. Seems to be lots of choices in our major political parties. I was looking at the first page of the ballot and who is up for election to be president of these United States. And to be quite honest with you, even though I may be a political junkie, and I really love this whole process that we live in America, there are names here that the Socialist and Liberation Party, the Green Party, the Justice Party, and I will admit that I know very little about what they actually represent now. If you were a Democrat or Republican, I think I can get closer to it. But the fact is that these folks are all here, and I'm sure that there's a way they got there, and they have to have a minimum amount of people interested in their position. So that's there, and people are going to look at that and say, "My goodness gracious." They also, if on that first page you have an opportunity in this state, which is one of the few states that does this, to allow a straight party vote, which I don't like at all, but I guess that's an opinion. It certainly hurts independent candidates if you have a lot of people in them. I heard the other day that something in the order of 61% of the state was unaffiliated. So if you're not a Democrat or Republican, and you want to get elected as an independent or an unaffiliated, it's awfully hard if you have a straight party ticket thing there. At any rate, so the local races for school and town council and also the town clerk. Yes. And I see she's running unopposed. She is. Saves on campaign finance money, I guess. The number of candidates running for the town council would seem to be an adequate number. I mean, from the perspective of choice, I think we're very fortunate.
I don't know how it was in Barnstable, but
This is a
are you
fascinating...
impressed by the number of people we have running for office?
I am, and I'm as a student of government, I am really intrigued by this form of government. I'm not used to having partisan races at the local level, and you usually have slots that you run for, so that candidate A is running against candidate B. Here, it's the highest vote getter or whatever. So this is a form of government. Even though I have been involved with for many, many years, this is a form of government that I was unfamiliar with, and I'm intrigued by it, and can't wait to see how it all plays out.
It does have its peculiarities, and I think one of the wonderful things that Doug and others working on the 375th committee are all about is that we can keep those political interests over here and just relish the fact that we're all Portsmouth residents in our beautiful town. So I think that's fantastic what they're doing.
One of the things, though, is that with all of the questions that are at the local level, I really would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge and thank not only Sal, but the entire Charter Review Commission. I know that they've put in an extraordinary amount of time. I don't think citizens really realize that, haven't been involved with the process, how many night after night after night and month after month these men and women have put into this. And so whether we agree with all of the recommendations or not, the fact is that we never can spend enough time saying thanks to the loyal and dedicated volunteers in our town, and the Charter Commission has really done an extraordinary job.
I agree. And one of the charter proposals is to actually make that whole process a matter of law so that it does happen. I was on the previous commission, and it was many years ago. And I recall when I got here, the rule of thumb was maybe every 10 years if we want to. So it basically was a majority of the town council that could decide whether it was, time to have a charter review or not. But I think one of the recommendations that came out of Sal's group was to legislate a periodicity for reviews. So important. I mean, what changes if you're a cell phone and your engineering changes by the minute, and I think the same thing must be true about how the way we live. The charter signifies what we intend to live by. So it is terribly important.
It is our local constitution.
It is.
It tells us what government will do, and just as importantly, what it should not or can't do. So, so it works both ways.
That's great. Well, why don't we shift into what actually happened over the last few months in Sal's commission. And as I understand it, many proposals came forth as you were reviewing literally word for word the entire charter. But at the end of that review, only a certain number of recommendations were brought forward to the town council. And at that point, the town council could and did, in fact, consider other possible changes that were not brought forth by the commission, because the commission was voting on the majority rule, I assume.
Yes.
So there might have been a minority position that the town council could look at, and I think they did, which is great. So what we'd like to, and I think I'd like to do, is to very quickly go through the charter changes as they came up. And Sal, if some of them are real no-brainers in the sense that they simply conform us to current state law, but some of the ones that you had more fun talking about, we'd love to hear a little bit about how you got to the language that exists in here. So why don't we take them? In order? And the first would be the question 9.
Question 8.
Question 8. Here we go. I'll flip this over. Here we go. And it states, question 8 states, in the background feature here, that the council will appoint a charter review committee at 8-year intervals, starting in 2019. They'll be appointed in January of that year. And there shall be 7 or more, and that's what I'd like you to talk about, 7 or more qualified electors on this committee, and they will propose recommendations for the council to review and approve. Currently, there is nothing in the charter that talks to the actual commission. Now it does.
That's right.
So how did you get to the 7 or more qualified, and what can a town council majority do with that? It's not going to be 7, but it must be or more. Your
Right.
committee had hundreds of people on it.
Oh, not quite hundreds, but about 30.
Yeah.
So I think we felt that 7 was a good number because, first, it's an odd number, so
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah,
wind up with
voting
any
Right.
voting problems. There was some discussion about should we limit it to a maximum, and we felt that that wouldn't be appropriate because the actual committee this time around was about 31 members, around 30. And the reason we didn't want to limit it was because we felt who would make the decision who gets on and who doesn't, right? And we felt that if a citizen came forward and wanted to volunteer, why should we tell them no? So with that said, I actually think, at first we thought 30 would be a lot, but it really wasn't because on average, people have their day lives and they can't make every single meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I always could make quorum, which is half of the membership. And typically we had about 20 members at about every meeting. So I think the minimum of 7 is good. I think if it's less than 7, you're not going to get a good cross-section of the town.
Okay.
And not putting a limit on the maximum is also good.
Okay. So there's some built-in flexibility, but if somebody wanted to limit the numbers to 7, it's perfectly reasonable to let them do that.
Right.
All right, well, let's jump on to question 9. Let's see. How about, let me ask you to go ahead and talk to that.
I could talk to 9. So this one came up. In the current charter, there's a section that basically says that all votes should be taken in public. And I agree that full disclosure, and being open, records law, everything should be done in public. But the fact of the matter is that Rhode Island state law has a provision in it that allows a town council or a school committee to go into executive session under only certain conditions. Conditions like, I'll give you an example. Let's say there was a real estate transaction that could not be discussed in public. The town wanted to sell a piece of property. Mm-hmm. And discussing it in public would be a problem because the discussion may be about what's the bottom line price you'll take. Yep. So there's an example of when you can enter executive session. Now, when you're in executive session, they're allowed to vote according to Rhode Island state law and behave by Robert's Rules of Order. The issue comes up that, okay, so let's say some votes are taken and the town council decides what the bottom line price for that piece of property is. The way our charter's written right now, they would be required to come out and disclose all votes taken. But Rhode Island state law has a special provision that says you don't need to, you eventually have to disclose the vote, but you can retain that vote until that information is no longer secret to the town. And so there was a discrepancy between the current charter language and Rhode Island state law, and the majority of the Charter Review Committee wanted to make them one and the same, so that the Rhode Island state law gives the town council these special privileges of being able to go into executive session and hold on to those votes till a time when they're no longer would jeopardize the work they're working on.
Does it then end up that vote, who voted which way, becomes a matter of public record at
Absolutely.
some point in time?
That's right. It is a matter of public record. So one of the things, now I've never been in executive session, and I don't know if, I don't have 100% that this has ever occurred or hasn't occurred, but what happens the way it is now is that they basically could wind up not taking votes and just discuss a topic. And to me, that's actually the worst thing to do, because now it never becomes public record. At least following the Rhode Island state law, it's required to become public record. Those votes are actually recorded by the clerk, and they are public records, just that they're not released till after the final transactions are done.
Okay. Does that mean that for every time we go into executive session, there will have to be a vote? You didn't imply that, did you?
If you're going into executive session, you're going into executive session to discuss a matter. I don't know how the proceedings, I've never been in an executive session. But
well, I can ask the town administrator, who's
Yes.
been probably in numerous of them. Isn't it true that occasionally you just have a discussion that you just feel would be embarrassing, or a personnel issue or something of the sort that, you know, that information that is not in a read-ahead, that is not presented publicly during a
Yes.
meeting?
There are specific items that qualify as legitimate topics of conversation. And you mentioned one that's sensitive. It might be the performance of an employee.
Right.
So, yeah, there are those executive sessions.
So in that case, there's not, your real estate, it was a good example of
Yeah.
an actual vote having to be taken, but maybe these don't. Well, very good. That's pretty informative. Question 10 says basically that the town administrator will publish an annual report, something that we do not presently have at all. And that report would include the budgets, performance, and all the things that might be of interest to not only the citizens, but any prospective citizens who might be coming and don't know a lot about our town. So was that controversial at all?
No, it actually wasn't. And John actually had brought it forth at a town meeting that he was in favor of such a report, and
Okay,
he
great.
would be publishing one. And when we went in, it was a no-brainer. It pretty much was, yeah, sounds like a good idea, and it would be a valuable asset for the
I've
town
always loved the
citizens.
idea. I ran around small towns in Maine a few years back and gathered up all their annual reports and said, gosh, these are great, you know.
Yeah, it
What's
forms a
fabulous, you can get town reports. The difference in Rhode Island, I was rather surprised in coming here that there isn't a state requirement, because in the two states that I've lived in, both
There isn't.
states have had a requirement that every community in the state have an annual report. And it's fascinating to be able to go back to the 1700s and look at the annual reports and whatever, and
True.
it's an important historical document.
Okay. We're going to move on here because we'll never get all of these in the half an hour allotted. Question 11 is concerns our town engineer. And at one point in time, as explained here, that we had a town engineer, and that position was then taken out of the charter. Was that controversial?
It wasn't controversial, really, and all we did was reinstate it. We didn't
Right.
reword it, actually. We left it as it was in
Okay.
1983 when it was repealed. We just reinstated it. And the reason I think the majority of the people were in favor of, the majority of the Charter Review Committee was in favor, was that the town has changed quite a bit, especially in the last 20 years. With some really large projects like the West Side Master Plan, the wind turbine, the tearing down of Elmhurst Public Schools, and we keep hiring outside consultants. And not that we shouldn't do that, maybe we should always get consultants when we need them, but the majority of the folks felt that having a town engineer gives a cohesive view of what's going on in the town and gives an unbiased opinion to folks like John and other members that run the town. So,
John, did you have an engineer in Barnstable?
We had an engineer. We were a much larger town, but we had a whole department.
A whole
Engineering
department of
yes.
engineers.
Yeah.
Right now, most of our expertise in engineering is in the Public Works Department in there.
That's correct.
They are not actually required to be professional engineers,
And they're not.
and they're not.
Right.
So I guess you'd vote for that. I guess the town engineer would be a great
I'm not
idea.
saying.
I know. Question 12 is concerning Public Works Department, and right now we have it in our charter that our Director of Public Works must live in Portsmouth. Your proposal was to allow a search committee for this important department to look elsewhere, just to go for the qualification rather than the residency requirement.
there was a little bit more to it than that. That was part of it, that we felt we could get a better candidate by going outside. But the real catalyst, I think, is that really convinced us that this needed to be changed, is that Rhode Island state law currently prohibits you from making such residency requirements. So this was another one of these, and it's in the full report. It tells you, if you're interested, you can get the full report. We have it's on the Portsmouth website.
Very good.
And it has the links to the Rhode Island state law showing you that we're basically, I don't want to say in violation, but we're not in in accordance with Rhode Island state law. So that was, there were some folks who felt, for the first reason you said, that opens up the pool of candidates, and a lot of folks felt that it should at least line up with Rhode Island state law, which prohibits such residency
Well, there you go.
requirement.
That's pretty easy right there. Question 13 has to do with a Department of Parks, Recreation, Arts, and Activities. Currently, we do not have such an organization in our town. The only question I had when I read this thing is, it says may as opposed to shall. So,
Yeah.
so what was the intent? What are we going to achieve if we agree to have this as a change?
So it's very interesting you point out the may and shall. Well, I will tell you that that word came up a lot in the Charter Review Committee, right? The consensus was that we didn't want to say that we shall have it because things like this cost money. And there were quite a few members that were watching, are concerned about how much is it going to cost the town, and they didn't want it mandated if we needed to cut back. But the bottom line is everybody was pretty much in agreement that it was a good idea to have a public work, Parks and Recreations director or a position, could be volunteer. The reason for that is we have a lot of activities that go on in Portsmouth,
yeah.
And they're usually run by volunteers. And a lot of times the volunteer groups, they don't talk to each other because they have enough to do in their daily lives. This would be an umbrella position that would allow to bring all this in under the jurisdiction of the town and get like maybe a website together. So when you have a new resident, they know what's going on. When I moved to Portsmouth, we were surprised to find out how much was going on, but none of it was really formally publicized.
That's true.
And this gives us an ability to formally publicize all the activities.
Yeah, I completely agree. I remember having a discussion with John several programs ago about when he arrived and he looked around for who's in charge of the ball fields here? I said, he was.
Right.
He couldn't turn around anyway. Okay. Question 14 has to do with the personnel system here. And perhaps you could talk a little bit about how you want to change the current way we do business.
Sure. So this one actually was brought forth to the Charter Review Committee by our finance director, Dave Fauscher. And it's really kind of simple. He's already under a mission to look at revamping the personnel system, rules and regulations and such. And then it dawned on them that after reading the charter that the personnel system actually only applies to 6 employees right now, the way it's written.
Goodness.
And the reason for that is that it exempts the department heads who are still exempted, but it exempts all union employees from the personnel system. So the point is, why would we have a personnel system that the idea is we invest all this time developing a personnel system and it only applies to 6 people. So the new wording says that it will include union employees so long as there isn't a provision in the union contract governing the same matter. Okay, so the union contract always has precedence. But if the union contract doesn't govern the matter at hand, then they fall back into the personnel system.
Sure. Wouldn't it be reasonable to assume that if the personnel system is in place, written in place, and that is the general guidance that will be occupied by all concerns, that when it comes time to negotiate contracts, that the negotiating team for the town will have to abide by the personnel policies. They cannot include a provision in a contract that doesn't follow the procedures.
I mean, look, in negotiations, a lot of things happen, right? There's some give and take. I don't think we meant the way it will allow for certain provisions to be put in the union contract. And if it's in the union contract, then that supersedes the personnel system. I will say that's a fact, how this thing is worded. But you bring up a good point that at least now, when they do go into negotiations, they'll conscientiously have the personnel system on their mind and know when they're going to deviate from it at least, right? Currently, right now, it doesn't really matter because the personnel system doesn't even apply to union employees at all.
Well, very good. That must have been a lively discussion.
Yeah, it was.
Question 15 is concerns membership in the planning board. It seems fairly straightforward here, but is this just another conforming to Rhode Island law
Pretty much.
issue?
Pretty much. Just a reiteration that, you know, we need to properly advertise positions when they come available and such. So it's just another Rhode Island law performance.
Our 16th, and I guess our final question, has to do with the town administrator and how. And I think I'm going to ask John to talk to that particular. What is meant by that?
This actually came from the town council itself after the Charter Commission had presented its findings. I think that the goal by those that brought this forward was to bring clarity. I'm in agreement with Sal as the chair of the commission that our existing charter is pretty straightforward in terms of who has what authority, whatever, but it isn't crystal clear, and I think that members of the council that proposed this wanted to not have any ambiguity in terms of who does what in a form of government. The existing language says that the town administrator shall appoint all department heads subject to the ratification or approval of the town council.
Right.
I think most would therefore assume that if the town administrator needs ratification from the council on department heads, that all other appointments are the town administrators to make without ratification of the town council. So this just clarifies that, and I suspect that the Charter Commission didn't address it because they probably didn't think it was necessary or whatever, but it's just it's a point of clarity, I think.
Okay. So nothing, as far as you're concerned, then the system of hiring the department heads and having the town council approve their choice, then everybody else is hired by you without the town council having to take a vote on it.
That's what our present charter says,
Yeah.
yes.
Seems to be working. Superior talent in our town in managing our departments. We've covered all of the changes to the charter, and we've got a couple minutes left. So
Could
maybe
you just mention, though, Jeff, that
Okay.
this full report is
Yeah.
available
Good point.
on the website if somebody wants to see the full write-up for each item.
We really
Very
want to
good.
encourage, because of the fact there's also state questions, that if people can find the time, that they go to the town website. There's also a link from the town website, the canvassing department, to the state, if you want to learn the state questions, whatever. We're trying to encourage as many
Yeah.
citizens as possible to read the questions beforehand
Good.
and know how they're going to vote.
And if you have any questions as to where you are going to vote, the town's website, I think we have a chart to show that. It's sos.com is the Secretary of State's website, and if you looked at what was available to tell you where to vote by district, you'd see that your districts are here and where you vote are here, but your street is not here. So if you do not know what district you're in, you have a couple of options. One is to go to the state website, and that's sos.com, I believe. Or you just call the canvasser's office, because I'm
Yes.
sure that Madeline has got a team of people in there gearing up for this election. It's
Or you can go to the town's
monumental
website,
work.
to the
Yeah.
canvassers department, and that gives you a link to the state.
Yep.
You just type in your address.
Just type
and
in your
it
address
comes
and
right
it'll tell
up.
you exactly
Absolutely.
which voting place to go to. So,
And like you said, if you don't have internet access, just call the canvassing
Sure.
office.
yeah, absolutely right. Well, we have 17 seconds left to our program, folks, and I want to thank John Klimm, our town administrator, for being here, and Sal Calceller for being here and sharing his insights. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day to you all.